Well, welcome everybody. So tonight our topic is suffering as our greatest teacher. And I was joking at the beginning that my heart isn't in it. My heart isn't in the suffering. Quick, somebody give me some. But the truth of the matter is I've had quite enough of my own. To be in the place that I am is the result of all the suffering that I have withstood, as is true of each and every person in this room. We are where we are because of the circumstances that have brought us to this place. Suffering as our greatest teacher is to develop an understanding, to develop a relationship with suffering itself that is one grounded in the understanding that there is no conceptual self. That the I that I think I am exists nowhere other than in my mind. And life, reality, is more than happy to remind you of this simple, basic fact time and time and time again. And we call this reminder suffering. Our suffering is best measured as the distance between the way things are and the way that we want them to be. The only way to close that gap is to let go of the one who wants it to be some other way than it is. I sit with people sometimes and they ask wonderful questions, because I meet everyone where they are, in whatever moment they're in. I meet them where they are. And they ask lovely questions. Well, is it like this or is it like this? How do I handle this situation? How do I handle that situation? And quite frankly, to me, it's all insert dilemma here, and there's a blank line underneath it. I don't really care what anyone's speaking about. I do at some level because I recognize the suffering that the person finds themselves in. But from the place I stand, knowing that my own suffering is all illusory, I know that yours is too. There's great compassion in the understanding. Compassion is how one who knows and sees one who does not. But truly, insert dilemma here. I've got this going on, I've got that going on. All right. My answer to you is let go of the way that you think it should be and flow with the way it is. That's my answer, no matter what you might insert in that blank line. It's that simple. Most people don't like that answer. They want it to be much more complicated than that. They want something to do. Let go until you realize there's nothing to let go of. Okay, that's too simple too. I want something more. Well, now you're suffering because you're wanting, and desire and fear are the root of all suffering. So, as long as you want it to be some other way that it is, including you and your wanting, and you not thinking you're where you're supposed to be, and you thinking that it's somehow wrong, and you thinking that it's somehow you that isn't getting it right, welcome to the game. It's all right here. That you are where you are in any given moment is the evidence that that's how it's meant to be. Period. End of discussion. But again, we don't like these kinds of answers. We don't like these kinds of things because the I, that illusory conceptual self, that egoic manifestation, is claiming ownership of the whole experience. And it's the one that's trying to claim ownership, the one that's trying to exert itself, the one that's saying, but it's me. That's the one that isn't going to get its way. Eventually we get to a point in the journey where we recognize the one that I'm trying to get away from, it isn't real. The one that wants to get away is the problem. So one of the things that I do is generally when I'm starting to talk with new folks that have sat with me, this is the first time we've gotten together, I start by saying that all things in this universe are love given form to serve a purpose. That we ourselves are love given form to serve a purpose. And that our purpose is to be love. It is to move through this world with love and kindness, generosity, gratitude, and grace. And to use forgiveness as the mechanism by which we embrace one another. Because at the end of the day, we all arise from a singular sea of conscious awareness. We are all one as consciousness, as energy, and as matter. It is the confusion of the conditioned mind that prevents us from experiencing this fundamental reality for ourselves. When we are born into this world as babies, we are born with a clean slate, a clear mind. It's the first time that a parent says to us, this is your foot, this is your nose, this is a bowl, this is a kite, this is right, and this is wrong. That is the moment at which our conditioning begins. It continues with friends and family, with school and work, with television and media. Every social interaction that we engage in over the course of our lives adds another layer of conditioning. Eventually, all of these layers give rise to the egoic manifestation of an I am that is not. We begin to believe that we are someone who must be doing something, and in this we find ourselves lost. That's basically my whole pitch. We're done. But it's that conditioned, conceptual self that has been brought up to believe that things should be a certain way, that we ourselves should be a certain way. And the true nature of the spiritual journey, right, is not to manifest your own reality or any of that. The true nature of the spiritual journey is to arrive at that place within your own experience of being, where you are able to experience life without the confusion of the conditioned mind. To see life as it is, not filtered through the conceptual self, not filtered through all of the history, all of the problems, all of the difficulties, all of the challenges, all of the ways in which we have defined ourselves. It is in the continuous process of defining ourselves that we create trouble for ourselves. It's also how we create trouble for others. In that, if I have an experience of you that I wear as you, and I say, well, this is who this person is, and I treat you the same way every time I see you, I put you in a box. And by putting you in a box, I put myself in a box. Now the whole world's in a box. That's how you create your reality. Through words and concepts and ideas, by defining yourself and defining others, and believing that the way you see it in your mind is the way that it is. And it's not. It simply isn't. And that all lays the groundwork for this idea of suffering as our greatest teacher. Because here we are, we're busy being someone, busy doing, I have things to do, I have places to go, I have this, I have that. You're doing it wrong, you're doing it right. I like this, I don't like that, this is good, this is bad. We're so busy judging everything from the position of our conditioning. So busy judging everything from the position of our conditioning that we're unable to experience life as it is. There was something I was listening to the other day, and it was Alan Watts talking about the nature of the Tao as a river, right? A common explanation of this movement. And he was talking about the difference between a realized person and one who is not realized, whatever those two terms mean to anyone. But the difference is that the realized person knows they're in a river, and they're not kicking against the current. They're just moving in the direction of the current, and they're allowing the current to take them. Just take me, just take me. Our suffering is meant to take us to that place where we shift our perception from that place of saying, here I am as a separate being, as a separate entity, living my separate life, and this is my world, and it's going to be my way. Our suffering is meant to break us of that notion so that we have nowhere left to go but to surrender into the truth of it all, to surrender into the understanding that we ourselves are not who we think we are. what a wonderful teacher suffering is, because you cannot ignore suffering. You can try, but it will find you. You can try to sidestep it, but it will meet you. And we go through this process. There's two sides to this equation, right? On one hand, I can say, everything's always exactly as it should be. It's a beautiful harmony of motion. There is a loving, intelligent awareness at work behind it all. And that it moves all things in the direction of its own purpose. And that you're of it. You came out of it, you live in it, and you'll return to it, but you never went anywhere to begin with. So all those things are just notions. But there's that thing out there, and it's moving, and it's doing everything it needs to do. And every single one of us is a perfect expression of its nature. Each and every one of us are a note within that great harmony. Each and every one of us is doing exactly what we're supposed to be doing in any given moment. So on one hand, I can say, oh, that is true. And on the other hand, I can say, but it's you. You're the one stuck in something that isn't real. And until you unstick yourself, you're not going to be able to see what's real. You're not going to be able to understand the totality of the truth that you are already. So you have to be able to move between those paradoxes. You have to be able to shift from that place of saying, it's all me, to that place where you're able to say, there is no me, so how did I look back on this it's all me thing? You have to be able to stand in both places at the same time and say, it's okay, I don't need to understand it. I just need to be with it because I see the truth of it experientially in my day-to-day life, because the more I let go, the more free I find myself. And our suffering is standing there with the whip saying, are you ready yet? And then you go, no, I'm not quite ready yet. I think I got it, but I need it again just to be sure. And it cracks the whip again. And then you get through that moment and you go, all right, I'm shedding that. I've learned a lesson. I'm moving through it. I'm letting go a little bit. Letting go a little bit. Just a little bit. And then next layer, next layer, next layer, next layer. Over and over and over again, as the conceptual self is being chipped away at. Suffering is the fire that the I is burned up in. And in this way, suffering is beautiful. It is grace. Suffering is divine grace, because one who suffers, at least one who suffers and wants to move beyond suffering, is able to use that suffering as a doorway. And I remember I talked to my mom, I've said this before, but I talked to my mom when I first moved to Florida. I was telling her all these things, and she's like, that sounds really hard and this and that. I said, well, when you learn to love your suffering, are you really suffering anymore? When you can find yourself engaged fully or enmeshed fully in a tremendously difficult circumstance, someone you truly love, is in the last throes of life, or someone that you're really dependent upon just lets you down in the biggest way, whatever it is, you can feel the pain, you can see the thoughts, you can watch it all. But there's something about your experience of it where you're maybe able to step back just a little bit and hold it all in awareness. This spacious awareness within which the I exists as kind of a figment that bounces around on the inside of that spacious place. And you, the version of you that you think you are, is this little circle, and the event is this little circle, and all the other people involved are these little circles, and they're all bouncing against each other. But in the spaciousness, you're able to see all that, and so you're not so wrapped up or so lost in it. You can be in the suffering, see the suffering, and actually watch your suffering work on you. Keep in mind that there's really nothing at all happening to you. First of all, there's no you in it, but that's another subject. There is the presence of being that is moving. And when we try to claim the presence of being as our own, and we begin to insert ourselves as the I, my sight, my hearing, my taste, my touch, that's where the illusory self comes up. And that's what has to go. That melting of the egoic self into the waters of pure being. You know, watch the whole thing. You know, in a lot of spiritual circles, you'll hear people talk about the nature of thought. Well, if you take your thoughts from this negative place over here and you move them into this positive place over here, you'll vibrate at a new frequency. All right, that's very interesting. And I was commenting on this earlier, beforehand. And one of the things I was saying is, to me, there are three primary spiritual paths. One is you can be an unhappy me. And you can have a whole spiritual path dedicated to being an unhappy me, figuring it out. You can be on a spiritual path that's about creating a happy me. Great, wonderful, beautiful. Create as many happy me's as you need to. And then the third one is letting go of the me entirely. Now, somewhere along the line, we do see that our suffering is giving us beautiful lessons and beautiful opportunities to learn and beautiful opportunities to grow. And it isn't necessarily about becoming more positive, because if you sit here and you say, this really crappy thing is happening, but I'm okay with it because, well, you know, I might learn something from it, that's not quite it. It's having something happen and not even seeing it as crappy, because that's a position from which the self experiences it. There's no self, so you just are the movement. It's something happening. Good, bad, right, wrong, indifferent, it doesn't matter. It's just happening and I'm moving with it. And you watch yourself move with it from that same place of awareness that you watch everything happen from. All your suffering, all the good stuff and all the bad stuff, it's all the same stuff. It's all the same stuff. And ultimately, this process of suffering, it's inviting us. It's just inviting us. It's this voice from beyond. Right? It's the nature of the all, the nature of the Tao. However you want to define it or describe it for yourself, it doesn't matter. But it's that sense that's inviting us deeper. It's saying, I know who you are. I know what you are. And here I am presenting you time and time and time again with a new opportunity to see it for yourself. So this weekend we had the twins out. I don't buy things very often. And this weekend, Camille's laughing, but I bought boogie boards for the kids because we live on the beach. And, you know, so one of the kids, he's, you know, kind of, there's a lot of fear. There's a lot of fear. And that's okay. Every being is as they are. So I found myself standing there with a boogie board, and I was inviting to come out a little bit further, you know, because he just wanted to ride the wave right up at the beach, like just that tiny little, I just want this. And I kept inviting him to come out further, and I would stand there and I said, just come out and touch my hand. Just come out and touch my hand. He'd come out and touch my hand, and then he'd come back off a little bit and go back. And it was a trust exercise, right? It was, come out and touch my hand. Turn around, put your board in the water, and I promise you, you will see that the wave you're catching is going to take you further. The ride is going to be so much more beautiful. The ride you're on is great, but if you'll step back and touch my hand, I'll show you something. And we did this a few times. Every time, moving out a little further, touch my hand. It didn't work every time. It doesn't matter. That's a beautiful way of seeing the whole journey. That loving, intelligent awareness standing just a few feet further than you're willing to go, saying, just come touch my hand. It's all okay. Just come touch my hand. Our suffering is only suffering because we choose to see it. Now, the choosing itself is part of the illusion too, but as long as we're in the illusion of choice, we're choosing it that way. Instead of seeing a difficult moment as suffering, we can see the beauty and the grace in the opportunity to let go a little more. And any being who has had even the remotest taste of true realization will tell you there's no you in it, and the more you let go, the more you will understand what that means. That has been the message of every being who has ever come from this place into this world and said to you, it's just this. You're just making it way more complicated than it needs to be. It's just this. Here, now, in the present moment. The beautiful unfolding process. So there are more things that I want to say on the subject, and I'm sure we'll get to them, but that's the beginning. So for those of you, this is the first time you come and sat with me, welcome. That's the kind of stuff we talk about. And so, so now, as I said, I open it up and we engage in dialogue and, see what different people's positions or experiences have been and how this affects us as a group. It usually takes a few minutes for the engine to get going.
Would you speak out?
Yeah, absolutely. Yep, exactly.
What you were reminding me of in another program is acceptance. This is what it boils down to. The sooner that I can accept whatever it is for what it is and kind of let go of it, the sooner I'm at peace with myself. That's kind of what I'm getting from what you're saying.
Oh, absolutely.
It equates to the same thing.
Yes, yeah, absolutely. There's another thing, so that actually helps me bring up another thing that I really wanted to make a good point of, because this came on the back end of something we were discussing last week. This understanding that every lesson is yours. Every lesson is for you and for you alone. Now, there's a dynamic within the harmony of things, a dynamic where you understand that all things are interconnected and interrelated and nothing stands alone. There is that truth. But often what happens is many people will get into this place where they say, well, if this thing is happening, maybe it isn't about me. And that's true, maybe it isn't about you. But if that's your go-to, it'll never be about you, and you will never learn your lessons. There has to be some part of you that always acknowledges that whatever is happening, no matter what is happening, there's something in it for me. Even if my only thing is to learn greater compassion, greater patience, greater acceptance, even if that's my only lesson, there's always something there for you. Always. And acceptance is absolutely a big part of it. And a couple of weeks ago, I did a talk on moving beyond acceptance to that place of loving what is. Because even in the act of accepting, right? It's almost like there's still the seed of an I in acceptance. I am choosing to accept. Well, you're not choosing. Reality is what reality is. You're choosing to accept reality. But it's not really. There's not really a choice involved in the matter. The choice is how hard do you want to struggle against the current? That's the only real choice. The choice we're making is how much do we want to struggle? How much do we want to kick and scream? So acceptance is absolutely beautiful, but there's something even beyond acceptance. There's a release into the movement. There is a release into the harmony where the egoic sense of I falls away. It is seen through. It is recognized as a manifestation within consciousness that is meant to serve a purpose. It gives rise to the seeker. The seeker goes out in this grand adventure called the spiritual journey. And then eventually the spiritual seeker goes, uh-oh, I'm not real either. And the whole thing falls away. Where is acceptance in that? There's more of a surrendering into what is. And even that dissolves. Even that sense of surrendering dissolves too. It all falls away in its own good time. It's a progressive journey. It doesn't necessarily all happen at once. It can for some people. But usually, the way I look at it is, awakening is just like when you wake up in the morning. You wake up and you go, whoa, a new day. You wake up. The awakening is that moment where you go, oh, it isn't what I thought it was. I'm not who I thought I was, and this isn't what I thought it was. And as you're waking up, you realize, oh, I've got something in my eyes. And you just you spend time clearing your eyes of all the residue. I've talked before about how when the self falls away, when the ego death dies, and that's not good language, but that's language we use often, you know, when we experience the nature of the ego death, there's a mourning period. We're not quite ready to let go of the shadow of what we thought we were. Even though we know it isn't real, we're not quite ready yet. So those are kind of all because that acceptance is beautiful. Acceptance is one of those steps, one of those stages, right? When we begin to find ourselves in these places, these difficult situations, and we go, well, I'm standing in line at the DMV, and this line isn't getting any shorter, and I'm not getting any younger, and I've got 1,000 things to do, and then we stop. We quiet the mind, we breathe into the heart, and we just sit with our number. That's how they call it. And we say, my lesson is patience. Let's see what else comes up. And you become mindful of the space you're in, mindful of your own state of being, and you watch the whole thing. You're in traffic. Same thing. It doesn't matter. Always the same thing. Just whenever we find ourselves in this place, okay. And we surrender into what is.
So the way I kind of see it is we're still expressions of singularity. So we're all the same singularity expressed differently. And we fool ourselves with creating the ego. But that's not to say that there is still the separation, although it is an illusion, but you still have the unique emotions and perceptions, and that's kind of the experience that you get by the physical, by the singularity coming into the physical. So it's not like the personal, like me experience, but it is a unique experience of a singularity.
Yes, to a point though. To a point though. So, I mean, every expression is serving its own unique purpose. Every expression serves its own unique purpose within the grand scheme. There's a point at which it goes from being personal to being entirely impersonal. It's like, you know, for as long as we're in the me, you know, it's very personal. And then we wake up and we have this dose of spiritual reality, and then there's like, okay, there's the me, and then there's this other thing over here, and I'm trying to figure out how to walk with balance. And we get to a place where there's just this. And it's very much like, you know, we all have to find our own way up the mountain, but once we're at the top of the mountain, we're all looking at the same view. Right? That's kind of the best way to explain it. We're all looking at the same view. And so from the position at the top of the mountain, you're just looking down and you're just like inhaling, and everybody at the top of the mountain is just inhaling, and you're all like, now what? And everybody laughs. Just this. So yeah, it is to a certain point. But then at the same time that that's true, there's also this understanding, again, the interconnected nature of things. So this brings up another good point. Recognizing that it is impersonal in that, let's say, you're having a difficult time with a particular issue, and you step into your home environment, to your work environment, and you're carrying the weight of this thing. You're going to be with people a certain way. You're going to have a certain texture or flavor or aroma in terms of how you express yourself in those interactions because of the weight you carry. If you have a day where you are feeling very light, you are going to have the same kind of effect. Whatever state you find yourself in, it's going to ripple outward in the direction of all other beings. And we are always, that is the way in which we are always exactly where we're supposed to be. That is the way in which we are all being exactly what we need to be in any given moment. You may be having a difficult day. You may be having a challenging situation so that it puts you in a certain state and has you move in a certain way and speak with a certain tenor so that you can be what others need you to be in that moment. You can be the person who shoots the bird at somebody while you're driving by or screams at you. You know, we watch somebody screaming at a person on a bicycle screaming at a driver, literally screaming at a driver. And whether you're the person on the bike or you're the driver, you're fulfilling a particular role within that moment. And it might not be for either being, it might be for somebody 5 cars back looking for a story that they can tell in front of a group of people. You don't know. We never know. Again, though, we have to balance that with there's a lesson in everything for us, because if we make that our default, then it's just like we just watch it all go by, and it's like, well, that's not meant for me. That's not meant for me. Well, what is meant for you? If you're in a place of absolute clarity, then I would say, wonderful. But if you tell me you're in a place of absolute clarity, I will ask you, on what? Who's in a place of absolute clarity? And then we can have a lovely dialogue about that. Because the only thing that's clear is this moment. Always. Only this moment. It's the only thing that's clear. Reality, doing what reality needs to do. So yeah, there's a personal and an impersonal, and it's all playing together, and it's all doing what it needs to do. And where we find ourselves in trouble is when we sit here and we start going, but. I know I know that I'm supposed to let go, but. There you are. You're drowning in the sea of reality. The moment you say but, you're drowning in the sea of reality. It's all right. Somebody will reach in and pull you out, but, you know, maybe not when you want them to. And it may not be who you want. And it may not be how you want. Because we never get what we want. We get what we need. When the two coincide, wonderful, but they usually don't. Usually what we need until we're in a fully surrendered state is a good swift kick in the ass. And we get that over and over and over and over again. The universe is more than happy to offer up what we need. Until the only world you live in is a world that is still and silent and quiet. That place where you recognize that all of the peaks and valleys have been of your own creation in your own mind. And that it is by collapsing the mind, letting go of thought entirely, being the experience instead of thinking the experience. Eventually we can get to that place where we see that it is our mind that has to be set aside entirely. And that's the surrender that I'm talking about, that place that our suffering is working to take us. And the sooner we learn those lessons, the more life will begin to let up on us. It really will. It really does. Whether that's because we no longer need the lessons and the universe says, all right, we're good and we're going to move you forward now, or it's because you just stopped caring. You're no longer so invested in the outcome of it all. It's like, oh, look, well, I guess I'm going to be homeless for a while. That's all good. Oh, look, I got a new boat. That's good. Oh, look, my job just went away. Okay. There's a story about, I was listening to it earlier. I've heard a couple of different teachers give the same story. But the story about a farmer and his neighbor comes and is talking to him from time to time. And the farmer has this horse, and this horse runs away. And the neighbor says, oh, well, that's really unfortunate. The farmer says, I guess so. A few days later, the horse comes back, bringing with it 3 stallions. The neighbor says, wow, that's really fortunate. The farmer says, I guess so. And a few days later, the farmer's son is riding one of the new horses, and he falls and breaks his leg. And the neighbor says, wow, that's really unfortunate. He goes, I guess so. And then the local constabulary, the local army comes marching through, and they're recruiting young boys, and they don't take the young boy because he broke his leg when he fell off the horse. And the neighbor says, well, that's really fortunate. The guy says, I guess so. And on and on and on and on and on it goes. Sometimes things seem unfortunate, sometimes things seem fortunate. It really doesn't matter. It all needs to be held the same way. Oh, now it's this. All right, so I started rambling a little bit.
I want to thank, I always dig what you have to say, but when that image that you had of someone kind of pulling us out of the water, you know, I'm so glad that I'm getting to the point where I'm kind of pulling myself out of the water, you know. And I don't really have great expectations that I'm going to not go in the water, and that's the good news, you know, because I sometimes have this perfectionistic sort of mindset that I'm going to stop falling in the water and I'm going to stop forgetting. And I guess my question is, lost, but I did have a question, and it's going to come to me right now in 1 second. So interesting, because it was really a good question.
It's unfortunate you forgot the question.
Wait. Bear with me.
Or fortunate.
It'll come to me again, but because I think that there's such a level that you reach often that I feel receptive to. But there was this idea of, I'll apply to my current my circumstance because that'll make me help me to remember a little bit. But it was really interesting for me to think about, like, if there's something in it for me. Like, I'll go along with the flow, right? Okay, so I'll go along with the flow when I see myself like resisting the flow, and I say, damn it, I need to be. Why am I doing this alone? My expectation is that the family gets together and they all do it together, whatever it is, but I have this expectation. Why am I doing this alone? Why was I the only one at my mother's bedside? Why? So then I'm in the victim, and then I spiral into the victim even deeper, and then there's the self-righteous victim, and then I'm there. And you know, I could have a troop of people saying, yeah!
Right, yeah.
Okay, so then I stop calling those troops. I'm noticing.
Good.
I can't entertain that because they're feeding in on it, right? So then, all right. The whole idea that you discussed earlier, or brought out earlier, of that's a really tall order for me to think that. So I'll pull myself out of that water, and I'm like, okay. The reason I'm, reeling myself back to reality of my own, Zen den, if you will, like sitting there, okay, I can be peaceful again because, okay, I might not be getting help from them, but I get to walk that beach every day. And I might not be getting help from them, but, I don't have to confer with them on every decision. And I can go on to a list of, maybe I try to get to like 10 or 12, and then I'm like, yeah. So screw them, because then I get all of this. I do want to get to that point. I hope I'm making my point. If I'm not, as long as I'm getting it. Sorry. My goal, I think, really is to go with that flow and feel how freaking painful it is to be alone in this process of the mayhem after death and no one helping me. Now, that's a story but sitting with that story, because it's not really a true story. I have like true sisters in my life that just don't happen to have the same blood I have. But they're like sisters, and they're really helpful. But not even letting myself go there, and just saying, ouch. And that's what I want to get to, and that's kind of what you're sharing. I know you're sharing that.
Well, I take it to a deeper level to get to that.
I'll take your deeper level in 30 seconds, because I think I have to try, and I really welcome that deeper level, because how, I don't know, maybe I already know how, I don't really know, but But I do know when I do sit there with that hurt,
Mhm.
it's productive. Because
Yeah.
it's real.
Sure.
And when I start to sit there in the pool of the river of all of that stuff, and I try to soothe myself with the, oh, but I get to walk the beach, it feels fake. When I just sit there and let it ride, let the tears drip, write the crap out, I'm like, okay. Then I walk the water, and I feel like, so you get, but I welcome what you have to share on that, because I struggle with that tension in between it all, and I waste an awful lot of time.
So, okay, so this one might be a little hard to reach into, right? But the reality is, you are completely alone.
Yeah.
You are completely alone. Now, I don't mean that in terms of you're completely alone. Just that the totality of the universe is expressing itself through you as a singular presence. And the relationship that is a relationship between your concept, between your experience of self and that totality. That's your relationship. That's where it is. Being able to be in that place where you know, I really am alone, but not lonely. Because what I am is inclusive of all that is. Now, what that space does, this is the detachment, that place of non-attachment that the Buddha and many other beings talk about. And it isn't a place that is empty of love or compassion. Those things are there. What I'm really saying is that when you step into this place, you understand and recognize you cannot do anything for anyone. You cannot help anyone at all. Nothing you do will help lift another person out of where they are. And you surrender to all of that. I'm alone in this whole thing, and the only thing I need to do is work on myself. To work within my own experience of being, to let go of all the things that keep me trapped. Then, when you're able to see through all of those things, you are able to be with others, because you're no longer alone. Now you are one with all, but you are still, it's one of those wonderful paradoxical situations. But you're able to be with others as the totality. You're no longer bringing all of your stuff to all of your interactions. You are an empty mirror, allowing the other to see what they need to see. Like I said, this goes to a deeper place. It goes to a deeper place. Where you have to understand that you're both alone and not alone at the very same time, and figure out how to be comfortable with that. There's great truth in it. There's, again, this is one of the most important, this is one of the deepest parts of that understanding of what we really mean when we talk about enlightenment, that thing called enlightenment. To be beyond the world. One of the things to recognize is that what you really are, is nothing that can be seen, witnessed, or experienced in this world. That everything you see is of you, but you're not any of it. It's weird. It's a weird thing.
That's a great image, though. That image of, of the empty mirror, and that I'll think about that a lot too, because then it's just clean, and
That's
then
right.
it's just, then it's almost a deeper level of service where I have my stuff here you are, and then what more can I do than to give them love versus my stuff, because I'm not in there.
Right.
Yeah, so I'm getting there.
Well, one of the other shifts that happens is, when we're still connected to our egoic identity, we want to be of help. We want to be of service. There's a wanting there, and it's a noble want. But once you move past that, and you're no longer in that egoic space, and you've transcended it, that mind, you recognize that all acts of service come to you. That any way in which you are meant to help others will arise in your field of now. that you don't have to go out and do anything. That whatever it is that is meant to occur within your experience of being is going to occur of its own accord. It's going to arise. If it's meant to, it's not like, it's not like the universe is accidentally going to forget. It's not like God is going to turn around one day and go, oh man, I'm so sorry, I left you sitting on the street corner. So it's, yeah. Anyway, so those are a few things there.
Oh, very cool.
Right. What came to me when you were sharing was the story last week, about how long will it take me to get enlightened? Right. It was like 10 years. And it's like, well, wait, how come 10 years? And I said, well, in your case, 20. I said, what do you mean 20? It's like, well, now really 30, right? And the whole thing that came to mind was that the question was, what I want.
That's right.
Is. And the minute that is set in motion, what I want, I'm already walking away from what it is.
That's right.
Which is, I am already here. So what I've been working on is the obstacles that get in the way of actually staying with what I am. When I start finding reasons to justify where I am, to make it comfortable where I am, I'm already not where I'm at, because I'm already seeking answers outside of what is, to justify what
Well, you're in a
is.
story somewhere
Yeah.
about this is what it is and here's how
So
I am.
I've been kind of practicing asking myself, what is it that is keeping me from being? Instead of seeking the answer to being, what are those obstacles for just being? For example, coming to the realization of the storyline. When I don't know if it's making sense, but it's
Yeah,
kind of
it
like
makes
this
sense.
reversal has occurred in the way that I go about seeking the answer, which is removing the obstacles that are keeping me seeking the answer, or whatever's encouraging me to seek that answer as if the answer is out there. It's just like, well, if I don't do this with my sisters, what will happen? If I am okay with this not happening, if I'm okay with not getting the help and me being the only one, and accepting that that's what it is, what will happen? And just kind of like walk backwards.
And you see where your obstacle is, right?
The obstacle is, well, at this point, I guess it's probably that I'm even questioning it or trying to explain it.
The obstacle is believing that there are obstacles.
Right. I realize that.
The obstacle is thinking.
But it just seemed, we've talked
Yeah.
for weeks now. It's been kind of like, okay, in the beginning with me, it was like, well, wait a minute. If the answer is out there or somewhere, I have to get somewhere to get the answer.
Right.
But as I go towards the answer, I'm walking away from the answer. And now it's like I realize that there's this kind of still this dualistic thing going on. That is, as I'm walking towards, I'm still and now I'm realizing that I'm walking back. And my hope is eventually to just like kind of like both
Stop
get in
walking.
tune and then eventually stop walking.
Well, there's
exactly.
nothing to walk towards. There's
Right.
nothing to walk
Walk
away
away.
from. It's like, where are you going? There's no distance between what you truly are and reality. There's no distance. So what are you walking away from? What are you walking towards? And that point at which you recognize it's all just happening in the mind. Quiet the mind. Oh, look, I'm dancing over here. Look, I'm dancing. Quiet the mind. Oh, now it's over here. Now look, quiet the mind. Just continually coming back into quieting your mind. And when it works, great. When it doesn't, great. Letting go of all notion of obstacles.
So when the suffering is there and the realization is there that there is something in it for me.
Right.
Okay.
There's still a me there,
right.
obviously.
And so therefore, it's like there is a place that I'm trying to still get,
Right.
which is to that whatever that place is. So, how do you make the decision of at what point it's like, okay, the lesson is enough of the suffering.
Mhm.
It's like I've been suffering.
Right.
I don't know what the lesson is, but the lesson might be that it's like I don't want to suffer anymore.
Sure.
And not acceptance of the suffering anymore.
Right.
And that's a tough concept for me because I've gotten myself to the point where I can endure suffering.
Sure, of course.
Okay? And then the problem is like the people that I'm connected with that might be dealing with me might not have the tolerance for endurance that I have.
Sure.
And that creates a level of suffering, which taps into another part of my being, which is fear
Right.
of abandonment, fear of loneliness, fear of this. However, it's like, hey, you know what? I have this like total endurance for suffering, so I can deal with this because there's a lesson in this. Something good that will come from this. Trust me. Keep suffering with me.
Right.
Don't leave me, please. Keep
I've
suffering.
been there, and that's a great place.
You know?
Because it's an endurance test that you're creating for yourself.
So I know at the end you're going to say, it's like, well, it's being loving and kind to yourself, and asking yourself, are you being loving and kind at this moment? And therefore, if you're not, just make the decision. It's like I'm stuck with all this. You know, it's like I see it.
Where you are now, though, the most loving and kind thing you can do for yourself is to work with quieting the mind. That's it. To recognize that when you're in a space, and you're like, you're mindful, right? You're mindful. Here I am in this space. All right. I'm encountering this. I'm seeing this. There's an obstacle here. Okay, what am I going to do about the obstacle? That's all happening in the mind. Stepping completely out of the mind and becoming one with the breath. Without telling yourself, look, I'm leaving my mind and I'm becoming one with my breath. Because that's thought too. That's my point.
And also not getting frustrated with yourself when you catch yourself mulling and thinking and just saying, wow, I'm glad I caught myself.
That's always true, right? Anytime we think we're not hitting it is to just say, okay, this too, this too. Always bringing that this too to the whole thing, always. But where you are right now, that's what I would recommend for you, because I know that that is a place that I've seen and been through, and that the answer to that dilemma is letting go of the thoughts themselves, of stopping the mind, of just settling the mind, settling into that stillness, settling into that quiet, breathing into the heart, just breathing into the heart, and participating. Oh, look what my eyes are doing. Oh, look what my ears are doing. Look at what my body is doing. But not with words and concepts and ideas, not with the thinking, just participating fully in the experience of being.
The endurance becomes not seeking the answer through endurance, but just actually do nothing.
Do nothing.
Sit.
Just be with it. Just be with it.
Don't try to fix it. Don't try to seize the stuff.
The more you try to fix it, the worse it'll get.
Yeah, I know that. I've experienced that.
Let me tweak this knob and let me hit this dial. Let me see what happens. Oh, that wasn't any good. Let me try this. Oh, that wasn't good either. You know, it's like you're trying to, dial in the, you've got one of those clothes hanger antennas, and you're trying to get in like a cable channel. It doesn't work.
The suffering is compounding.
It is,
And
yes,
the more
absolutely.
that it compounds, the more I keep thinking it's like there's
That's
a lesson
right.
in this for me.
And the lesson is to stop thinking.
Okay.
That's at that stage. The lesson is just let go of the whole thing. Collapse the mind. Just and when you get to those subtle layers of thought, when you're like, look at how good I am at letting go of my mind. No, that's in thought too. No, that's in thought too. It's an interesting experience. When you have that experience of completely losing yourself in something, when you lose yourself completely in an activity, like watching a sunset or whatever it is, you lose yourself completely in the activity. That's what I'm talking about. Being able to do that consciously, to lose yourself in the moment, to lose yourself in the experience of being. There's no you to begin with, so you're not really losing it. You are the experience. You and the experience are one. This is just the vehicle through which the experience is experienced. But even that's not true. So it's just collapsing the mind. Being fully present with what is. Oh, look, now this, whoop, there I am again, running across my own mind. There I am again. And you're closing that gap. That imaginary, illusory gap in big ways. In big ways. I remember the first couple of conversations we had, and I hear you now, and you're closing that gap in big ways. It's beautiful. Yeah.
spent time together. I had this experience where I was, just given this gift, and the ego was just completely smashed, and I was just completely in this flow of nothingness. I was like that for several weeks or so. And then something happened a week or so ago. I don't know what it was. Maybe because I live with a roommate that's like a 2-year-old on crack. I mean, there's no, and then I just, here comes the ego again, right? And it just was full force. I mean, I was in resistance to everything.
Sure.
Everything. Didn't like the way my clothes were hanging in the closet. I mean, just everything. And I just cannot, and I'm better today. I'm much more, have my feet more both in the awakened state, but it's like this enduring the suffering, because I'm thinking, okay, now this dude did not bother me before when I was completely just in the flow.
Mm-hmm.
I could just see him, literally just see him as a manifestation of the same flow. And now all of a sudden, he's irritating hard. So I'm thinking, and I know that my irritation is just an illusory story, right? But it's like it's just been such a heavy blanket. And you're right that everything that I do from that state, it colors every other interaction that I have. But my thing is that I'm thinking, well, I need to endure this irritation, even though I could move somewhere else and not be dealing with this irritation. Well, now I'm thinking, okay, well, this irritation is an illusion, so I need to sit right in the middle of it and suffer for as much as I can, because I like to make myself suffer.
Sure.
And now I'm just like all confused by this whole thing. It's like nothing has changed. The situation has not changed, but the storyline is back. The ego is back, and it's telling me, I don't have to put up with this. I don't have to do that. But then the other part of me is like, why can't I put up with this? Why can't I do this? I was doing it before, and it's just like,
So when we get to that place, a lot of times what we're being presented with is that opportunity to see how far we've come and to create a new relationship with our suffering. Because now that you've had that experience, right, that spacious experience that, I watched it all experientially fall away. You had, the way you described it, it was very real and very true. Because you used beautiful language when you were describing it. So you have that now. You know that's real. That's the only reality there is. The question now is, can you hold your suffering in the center of that spaciousness? Can you be in your suffering, but from this viewpoint? In the suffering from the position of the Absolute?
yeah.
Can you be what the universe needs you to be, regardless of what you're being asked to do?
So if you're in a place like that of suffering and you have an opportunity to resolve that, why wouldn't you take the opportunity to resolve that instead of just saying, well, okay, I need to be with the suffering?
So every situation is unique. Every situation is a set of its own circumstances, right? So I have some familiarity with some of the stuff that she's been going through. So one of the things that's interesting, right, is and you see this a lot in like New Age, New Thought schools, where they will take the teachings of some, Indian saint or some mystic or something like that, and they will say, oh, well, they said these things, and because they said these things, this is the way it is. And it's like, no, they said those things to that person. There was an exchange of truth from the source to that which needed to see itself more clearly as the source. And that was a That was a one-on-one dynamic. And then what happens though is sometimes we'll see that and we'll say, oh, here's the story I'm going to tell myself about what was being shared. And we've shifted in a way that isn't serving us because we're not looking at the totality of it all. We're not looking at the complete works of the individual and recognizing that this movement, this movement, this movement were different. They were all shifting patterns within a greater exploration of truth. And my job is to look at the patterns and to see the bigger picture than it is to get zeroed in on this one person said this one thing and therefore that is all there is. And that happens a lot in some of the traditions that we find ourselves in these days. It's more about being able to recognize that every situation is perfectly unique to the set of circumstances that brought it about. So where one person, for them, it may be, you need to go left. The other person may need to go right. One person may need to go uphill. One person may need to go downhill. One person may need to stand in their suffering, and one person may need to draw a boundary. And so it all varies. It's all kind of a shifting movement. One of the most beautiful things is to recognize within your own experience that you can never make a mistake. That whatever you do is all right. That there are no accidents in any of it. But what I would say is within the understanding of that is the opportunity to shift, is the opportunity to flow in a way that is more harmonious and allows us to experience greater and greater degrees of peace. So if you're someone who finds yourself in a situation where there is suffering and you have the opportunity to resolve it, then by all means, certainly resolve it. But what we often find is that our method of resolution doesn't necessarily have the kind of impact we want it to. What we often find is, if I'm, reaching into a place where I'm saying, you need to be this way, or you need to do that way, or the issue or the fault lies with you, then you're creating more division, more separation, and more resistance on the part of the other person. And now you're in opposition instead of connecting, right? Whereas the situation is much better looked at from the perspective of what is your role in it. What is your role in it? So where you sit, your role may very much be, I'm in this situation where this is, I'm learning to love from a new place that I have discovered within myself. And for me, standing in my suffering may be a valuable lesson. I might get to a point where I'm done and I really don't want to deal with that bullshit anymore, and then you'll step away from it. And that too is perfect. Whereas if we find ourselves in a situation where, we are looking for other people to treat us a certain way, and we aren't getting anything we want, and we're finding ourselves in difficulty after difficulty after difficulty after difficulty, and there's no way out, very often what we have to look at is why we're exposing ourselves to a situation that carries so much weight, and in those situations, perhaps drawing a boundary and moving beyond that boundary is the place we're supposed to find ourselves. So every situation is unique, and that's important to hold whenever we have these kinds of dialogues, right? Because I know many times I want it to be a certain way. It isn't that way. Let me see if I can make it that way. And, as long as you're doing so from a place of good intention, you're like, you know what, if you acted this way and I acted this way, it'd be great, it'd be harmonious. And the other person doesn't do what you want them to do, then you have to go, okay. You let it go. And if you can't let it go, that's about you. If you say, I want it this way, and the other person says no, and you have a problem with it, that's your problem. And then you have to decide, all right. We talked a little bit about that some in the relationship conversation we had. So I don't know if that's helpful. Yeah, I want to make that delineation because I think that's important.
Also I know, okay, and it's like, since I've had my little awakening, that's still in process, it's like I get to see her process because there was before, and I've experienced what she's going through, and from what I hear, it's kind of like, but I was okay with all of this, and then all of a sudden, no, and for me, I know, like, with my tendencies is like, I can get really impulsive about doing things because all of a sudden I'm righteous about what I feel, and it's not in tune with what the awareness that I've had. It's just like that ego itself, all of a sudden kicking in, you know, and it makes perfect sense to just do this, you know, and I have to figure it out. And right there, I just have removed myself, because the truth, if that is the truth, it's that truth. And it will be there with my emotional component attached to it, or without the emotional component attached to it. You know, when I'm totally breaking down because of it, it's like you said, it's my problem. You know, it's me. I'm reacting now. If I let go of everything, if I'm back in the stream, and I question myself why, then I think the answer is just it's there. It's like I don't want to. But it's not being like driven by a desire to put an end to something other than I want to just put an end to something. It's, I don't know if that makes sense, but it's just driven differently for me.
Sure.
Like I'm starting to pick up like this, where it's like, I can't. It has to be, and why? Why do I have to? I don't understand. To where it's like.
Now, pardon the language, but I've said before that my two most common conversations with God, the universe, whatever language we want to use, my two most conversations are, I love you and fuck you. Those are the two most common conversations. And that's okay. To be in that place where you're, why does it have to be this way? For as long as you need to be. Why does it have to be this way? Being in that place where you're like, why does it have to be this way? Doesn't take you anywhere. Ultimately, it shows you the futility of asking why. In that way, it serves its purpose. So I find myself in those places from time to time. Nowadays, it's more like, almost like, you know, if you stand up and you turn around really fast and you get a little bit dizzy. Whereas before, when I would find myself in fear, uncertainty, and doubt, it would still be this kind of overwhelming thing where I was like, oh my gosh, what am I supposed to do now? I'm supposed to be better than this. I'm supposed to know more. I'm supposed to have this awakened understanding, you know. Now it's very much more like I'm just a little dizzy. It's like, oh look, that was interesting. It's more like that now. Because it's just that quiet, you know, that stillness. It's also being able to recognize that, not to take any of it too seriously. Right? Not to take any of it too seriously. You have that position from which you can view the situation, and you can understand who you are, and you can understand what this all really is. It's just being able to hold on to that by the tiniest thread in the back of your consciousness somewhere. This really sucks, but it's all okay. Shifting that butt in a different direction where it's no longer a butt that increases denial, but it becomes that butt that we hold on to for dear life so that we can maintain some degree of sanity amidst the chaos of life. Because this world is insane as it appears, but it's only insane so that it can show us our own insanity so we can learn what real sanity is. Letting go of all this. Letting go of the conceptual self, letting go of the conceptual world.
Yeah, that's good. And I think, because I know even in the midst of when I was like really losing it a couple of days ago, I was like just really losing it. But there was part of me that was sitting back here laughing.
Yeah.
At the fact that I was like, wow, yeah, you really are losing it. So there still is that separation of being able to see that it's really an illusion, but then there's that part of me that tries to resist. Like you just said, like, you know, I've had this awakening, I shouldn't be having all these feelings, I shouldn't be, you know, and then there's the I again, you know.
Right.
Well, because it's irrelevant what I do in this situation, it is exactly what it should be. But it's just,
all the paradoxes, they wind themselves up,
yeah.
and the rational mind is busy trying to sort it all out.
Right.
But the rational mind is incapable
Right.
of piecing it all together in any way that makes sense. all you have is the knowledge that somewhere back here, it's all okay.
Yeah. And I think that's what I finally got some time to myself where I was able to just be quiet without this constant barrage of noise and I need this, I need that from this other person. I was just able just to get in my own space, have some compassion for what I was feeling. And just, it is, it's all good.
Keep in mind also, you know, it's interesting when we see the dynamic at play of being in resistance to resistance.
Yeah, that's what it was.
We've talked about this before too,
Yeah.
right? You know, when you're in that place and you're in the mind and you're like, oh look, resistance. Allow for the resistance to be, right? Don't get into that place where you're like, oh, I'm supposed to know better. You know, I mean, if you really go back to the core root of the whole thing, if you go to the core root of the whole thing, this is all a shifting, changing, temporary, ephemeral stage upon which the source of all things is playing itself out. And everything is occurring in perfect harmony with everything else. And that whatever we find ourselves in is a part of the whole thing. It's all okay. If we can keep returning to that place, acceptance goes deeper, I saw you.
Yeah, I just had a visualization of like a spiritual journey, and you have your conditioned self, you know, brought from birth. And so basically on your spiritual journey, there's probably like landmines hidden all throughout your conceptualized self.
Yeah.
And you're walking along your spiritual journey, you step on that landmine, and it's something that was planted before,
That's right.
but it's exploding in your face right now.
That's right.
And you're now equipped from a different standpoint along your spiritual journey and with your awakening to kind of like, whoa, where'd that come from?
That's right. And ultimately it shows us, all these things, they show us that it's all in the mind. Collapse the mind, and it goes away. It's not, that represents a certain stage though, and I want to make that clear. That represents a certain stage. Collapsing the mind. It's when you've negotiated, you know, when you've negotiated the obstacles. Because at first, it's like somebody put an Empire State Building in front of me that I have to climb, like that's the obstacle? And then, you know, and then the obstacles, they get smaller and smaller and smaller and smaller. And then, you know, it's like, you know, it's just a field. It's just all empty space. And you're like, oh, it's all okay. But it's a progressive process. It's a progressive process. So it's not to say that, you know, just let it all. No, you have to go to, you have to meet life where you are. And you have to take from life what you're meant to in this moment. Not live in a comparative state, not to live in that place where you're necessarily chasing some idea of the way you think it should. But just surrendering to the way it is in this moment. That's always kind of the basic, you know, bring it back to that place. So,
yeah. I was going to say that, you know, it's interesting because even when things aren't like, even when there isn't big suffering, this just, I've been noticing more and more because I went through like bigger suffering recently last year, and then now for me things are kind of calming down, but I'm noticing how reactive my ego is to everything, wanting to control everything, and even getting annoyed with all these tiny little sufferings, and you know, basically it's like it just wants to be suffering all the time.
sure.
In some way, because suffering somehow, it equates suffering with control, is kind of what I've been noticing, and that that it's habitual.
Yeah.
I mean, I've
It
got
is, yeah.
I've got a habit of, there's always something that is not quite perfect, and that has to be fixed
That's right.
in some way, whether it's a tiny little thing or whether it's a really big thing, and it's causing emotional turmoil in there. So there's always this emotional turmoil that's like turning and turning, And so it's like a lifetime of being like that.
That's right.
It's a complete lifetime of, I mean, yes, there are the beautiful space, the beautiful moments where you're watching the sunset, you're walking on the beach, you're doing whatever. But outside of that, I keep noticing all the subtle suffering.
Right.
That's like, you know, it may not be really dramatic, but it's also, there's some kind of a level of it still makes me feel like, it still makes me feel sometimes out of like my emotional self is not settling.
Right. Yeah.
You know, so I'm doing that a lot now. I'm doing the breathing, even with the little stuff.
Mhm.
I'm just like doing the breathing and trying to detach, and trying to kind of bring myself back. But I don't know. What do you say to that? What do you think about that?
Well, I think that being able to take those moments to breathe, even with
Yes.
the little things, is great, right?
Yes.
And it's not so much necessarily detachment, because
Yeah.
I know I use that word myself quite often,
Mhm.
but it's a
Yeah.
word we have to use carefully in the
Right.
spiritual conversation.
Right.
Because it's, you know, we need to be fully present with
Mm-hmm.
at one level and disconnected from at another, right? It's that whole being in the world but not of the world, or of the world but not in the world. It's that.
The world, but not of the world. Yeah.
It's that. It's you have to hold both at the same time. But it's a place that we hold, you know, as we practice.
Yeah.
We learn to hold it more capably as we
Right.
practice with it in each and every new circumstance. So, you know, and I know Camille and I have talked about this before, you know, we'll have these conversations, but this is so innocent. And I say, no, it isn't. It's all the mind, and it's all trying to do its thing. And even those things that seem small and insignificant, they're the ego's ways of trying to hold the groove open so that you
Yeah.
can't let go. So I think developing a relationship with even those little things where you can say, oh, I'm in resistance to something I don't like, or I'm chasing something I do like, or whatever, and just being able to breathe in to the heart and say, all right, this is here, and be fully present with it. But then not to believe it. Whatever the mind is telling us about the situation we're in, to see it and be present with it, but not to give it any weight. If we can see our thoughts just floating in the space, and let them float. Oh, there you are. Yeah.
Yeah.
So I think, you know, I think you're right on track with that, and it's absolutely true, right? We've talked about this before too, but you know, it's like the grooves in a record. You know, we've lived all our lives a certain way. People, you know, telling us this. So, you know, these grooves, they run very, very deep, and that's why I said, you know, awakening and some of these different metaphors that we use, some of these different ways in which we explain this process. For me, there's always an importance to say, it isn't just a huge explosion all at once. For some people it is, but that's very rare. Usually it's some experience of the whole thing falling away, a sense of freedom, a sense of what, and then it's just all the same shit from a different perspective. And you're just clearing out your eyes. You just, you know, oh, okay.
Yeah, you know, it's funny because when you have the big sufferings, and then you think, okay, I'm gonna kind of you see yourself kind of getting to the end of that, or there's some kind of resolution, or there's some way that it settles down in a way, and then you think, okay, now I'm gonna have some peace for a while. No, you are not gonna have some peace for a while, because it's just all this other little stuff jabbing at you.
That's right.
Constantly. It's just, and I think having the big things makes you even notice more
That's right.
the little things, because of the fact that you think, well, now I should have this piece. Where is it? You know, why isn't it there?
And all
So,
these little
yeah.
needles that are poking and prodding, just in the context of this specific conversation, I would say all those needles poking and prodding are there to remind you that it's not really up to you. That peace is something that will come to you when you are ready for it. And that maybe surrendering to the poking and prodding is part of that process. Who knows?
Okay.
All right, well, we've got just a couple more minutes if anybody else wants to bring anything up.
So suffering is just completely made up in our minds, and it's anything that we give any kind of value to,
Well,
or depending on the level of value of what makes it suffering.
it's the story we tell ourselves about the situations we find ourselves in. And if the story we tell ourselves is, I don't like it, and it shouldn't be this way, and I want it to be some other way, that's
So
suffering.
when we place judgment on it.
When you place judgment, absolutely.
simple
When
as
you
that.
judge a situation, the whole thing is about,
Right.
again, when we look at something, we say, well, it should be this way. We're basically saying, I know better than God. I know better than the universe. I know better than that which brought it all into
Right.
existence.
Right.
I'm setting myself above that which is.
Even
So
just
it's all
something as
judgment.
simple as, like when we were talking about this and I was talking to a friend about judging like the weather, like standing outside in the morning and saying, oh, look, it's raining. It's bad weather.
Right.
And placing the judgment of the rain with the bad, associating the rain with the bad, instead of just saying, oh, look, it's raining.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then being conscious enough not to pass that down to all the people around us, like raising the children,
Right.
and saying, oh, look, it's raining, it's bad weather.
That's
So
right.
it's just, oh, it's raining.
And that's, the
You know?
children
And then it's like, oh,
dynamic
it's
is
raining, now I'm
huge.
suffering, now I'm sad because it's raining, and then we put all these other,
That's right.
But
all these
it
other
isn't,
things.
Of course
on
that
there.
would
it
be
isn't the
raining
bad
over
weather,
there.
right? It's that you almost feel bad, or you're almost annoyed that it's raining. You know what I mean?
But
It's
isn't that just
it's
learned,
not saying the word,
But how-
oh,
but
it's
how to
bad
be
weather.
learned?
Right.
There's an emotion
Yeah, that's right.
underneath that's saying it's bad.
That's an expectation.
And it's a, yeah, or an expectation.
Well, it's all about the story we choose to tell
Yeah.
ourselves. Because because usually it's going to be something along the lines of, oh, it's raining. I wanted to,
be sunny.
right? And
Right.
the rain has limited my field of potential. I may have actually planned to spend the whole day in bed anyway, but because it's raining and I don't have a choice anymore, now it sucks. And so it's like, it's the story we're telling ourselves. It's the story we're telling ourselves. When we go outside and it's like, it's too hot. I know I do that. It's too hot. Too hot for what? Why are you outside? If it's too hot, go find something else to do. And the fact that it's too hot and that I don't like it's too hot becomes the momentum that moves me where I'm supposed to be next. And maybe the rain, seen a certain way at a certain time, is just a way to shift you into what's next. And it gets into that place where it's, yes, you're here. Yes, you're thinking. Yes, it's you. But no, it's not. Everything is happening for you and through you, not to you.
So when we notice a story,
Yes.
any story,
Any story.
any time,
Yes.
there's usually that's it. I mean, that's kind of like the big bell going off, like, hey,
I'm in the thinking mind.
I'm in the thinking mind. I'm doing it again.
That's right. That's it.
And just stop.
like, and just stop.
And just stop.
And just, yeah.
But to bring to that moment whatever tool is most appropriate. Because sometimes what's most appropriate is being present. Sometimes what's most appropriate is, being in resistance. Basically, whatever comes up is what's most appropriate. What I would say is that whenever we find ourselves in the thinking mind, reminding ourselves that the thinking mind isn't real and letting go of the thinking mind. Like, to me, that's the highest teaching. It's the highest practice. It's the only way of being. It's to be the silence and the stillness and the quiet that sits in the center of the storm. Let the storm rage. Me, I'm good. It's all quiet here. So the world can do what the world does, and you just let the world do what the world's going to do. Because the world, it's all, the whole thing is there for you. All of it. All right, so that's probably enough for now. Thank you all. Yeah, go ahead. Yeah, go ahead. One last thing for Marie.
This is just like, I know. It's like all tying in for me, like together, like this pure awareness with awareness of, and then, like, in Buddhism, it's like there's the awareness, and when there's contact, then the storyline kicks in.
That's right.
So it's like, like this whole, like, tasting exists, and then there's taste, and then there's tasting.
Right.
And with the tasting comes the storyline of what I am tasting, which has nothing to do with the ability to just taste.
That's right.
And the rain, it's like the storyline. And I used to tell my friends who have chronic pain all the time, it's like, pain is inevitable, but suffering, no, pain, and suffering is optional, right? And it's like, I used to say that, I thought it was the coolest thing to say. It made perfect sense to me, but I really never understood it like I understand it now. Like, it's like, I have back pain, and it's back pain, and it sucks, and it's back pain. And really what it is, it's back pain, and I don't like it, and it's back pain. And then the suffering is like, I'm never gonna be able to go scuba diving again, And it's like, I'm so young.
Right.
And why God? Why me? It's like, what's
That's right.
happening to me? It's like, none of that has anything to do with.
That's right.
It hurts.
That's right.
And I'm in
That's
pain,
right.
and it sucks. But the rest of it is the storyline that comes with it. And it's just like, I'm having these breakdowns of everything, like the storyline. When we first met at the temple, you remember, I gave you some grief that first time that we met. Because I was going to test you and break you down and prove to myself that you were not what you're attempting to be.
I'm not attempting to be anything.
Exactly.
That's why it didn't work.
But my awareness now is that if I wouldn't have done any of that, I would have been exactly where I'm at.
That's right.
Right now.
That's right.
Okay, but I just have to put myself through that process, which is the suffering that I cause myself because of a storyline of a perception of my conditioning that I have about somebody that comes across like you. And it had nothing to do.
Had nothing to do with me.
Exactly. So it's like, man, it's been a trip.
That's
And it
great.
ain't over yet.
And it ain't over yet. All right, so next week I'm going to be talking about navigating the spiritual journey, and people have asked me before, like, how do you find things? How do you come to things? How do you, is there a book I can read? Is there a lecture I can listen to? That kind of stuff. And what I want to talk about next week, and I'll weave in some of my own experiences with it. But what I want to talk about next week is how we're always being presented with exactly what we need, and how to navigate, how to see ourselves through the process of being on a journey. How to find our puzzle pieces, let's put it that way. So that's what we're going to talk about next week, is how to find our puzzle pieces, how to put our puzzle together, and how to leave the puzzle behind. So, and so thank you all for coming tonight. I really appreciate it. It was a lovely conversation. Thank you so much.
Thank you.